I was asked to build furniture for a Montessori school, and I decided to do the shelving units first. There's a lot of them. There's 16 shelves, and I thought I would talk about the process of building the shelves, not actually showing you how I build it. That'll be in another video. But things to look out for if you're deciding to do it yourself. The first thing you want to do, obviously, is get the wood. And the Montessori furniture, as I understand, is all light-colored wood. I don't know why, but it's light-colored. So you're going to have wood that looks good. So what I chose was birch plywood, 3/4 inch birch plywood. Now, get them in 4x8 sheets at the Home Depot, and they will cut them for you. You're going to need a table saw, you're going to need an electric drill, you're going to need a pocket hole jig. That's probably all the tools you're really going to need. If you don't have a table saw, the Home Depot will cut the wood for you down to the size you want it. And these shelves are going to be 30 inches high, 48 inches long, 12 inches deep. And so to start out with, I have 10 sheets of plywood. I had them ripped down the middle so that each sheet is 2 feet wide. The first thing to consider, though, is that your sheets aren't going to be all of them 2 feet wide. And if you don't take that into consideration when you start cutting, then you're going to end up wasting an awful lot of wood, because your last shelf will not be a foot wide. It'll be something else, and then you won't be able to use it. So I would recommend, when you go to the Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever you're going to get the wood, if you do have them cut it for you, don't make multiple trips. If you need 10 sheets, get 10 sheets at once. That way the error that they put into it will be the same, at least on all the wood. If you go twice, then the second time you go, you're not going to get the same measurement as you did the first time. And it's not going to be off by a lot, but it will be off. And let me show you what I mean. Okay, this sheet here (24 inches), right on the dot. Corresponding sheet, 23 inches, 23 7/8 inch. So it's off 1/8 of an inch, which is the thickness of the saw blade. Now, when I start ripping these into 1-foot panels, I'll have one that's a foot, and the other, now my saw blade is going to be taken off 1/8 of an inch too. So I'm going to be off 1/4 of an inch. So instead of having two 12-inch boards, I'm going to have one 11 3/4 and one 12-inch. And obviously you can't do that. So try to get the wood and cut it yourself, so that you're not left with a lot of extra wood that you can't use. Now, if it's 11 3/4, you can use it for something, but you can't use it for. You'd have to use you'd have to save all the bad pieces, all the 11 3/4 inch pieces, and make a shelf out of that. So that's the first thing to consider. The second thing is, if you don't have a table saw, then you may want to consider having them cut it in half too, or in thirds, however long you're going to decide it. Now, it's 96 inches, so since these are going to be 30 inches long, I don't have to have them cut it exactly 30 inches. I can have them cut it like 31 inches. And that way, the error that they'll build into it won't matter, because I'll just come back and rip it all down to 30 inches. But it's easier to transport, and it's certainly easier to cut if the boards aren't quite as long. If you do keep them long, you're going to have something on both ends to support them, because you'll definitely mess up if you're trying to hold an 8-foot board against the saw. Now, the other thing that I do is I cover the edges of the plywood with a strip of wood. So I keep a separate saw set up so that I don't have to keep adjusting it. And then I'll just take the wood, run it through, and I'll come up with these little thin strips, and I'll cover the plywood edge with it. And I'll show you that once I get going on it. So anyhow, I'm going to start now. And the other thing about using large pieces of wood is that they're easier to stain, or excuse me, they're easier to sand, and they're easier to varnish. So if you have a bunch of 12-inch boards 4 feet long, that's a lot of work trying to varnish each one of those and sand each one. So I like to use the bigger wood and then cut it down. So the process that I'm going to do is I'll be sanding all of these boards, and I'll let the dust settle. And once the dust settles, I'll then go back and I will put a couple coats of varnish on them in the morning. And then after I have that, I will then start cutting them up into 12-inch wide and 4-foot long boards. Now the 4-foot long boards, only the top will be 4 foot. The inside obviously is going to be 1.5 inches less, because the outsides are 3/4 inch thick. But again, I'll go into that once when I'm actually building it. So that's just an overview. After the cabinets, start doing the work desks, start doing the tables, round tables, square tables, rectangle tables, and all the other odds and ends you might find. All right, so let me shut the camera off and continue cutting these boards down to the correct width. Then I'll sand them, I'll varnish them, then I'll rip them down, and I'll start the actual construction.